Okay, hi, how are you guys doing? I'm going to be going over how to use this technology I've come across called Flowise to create essentially an LLM backend for your Next.js project or React project so that you can use a lot of LLM technologies without necessarily needing to code them directly into your application. And this is a very easy way to do that. It allows you to use LangChain to string together different kinds of prompts and database storage kind of devices to create all kinds of unique and interesting artificial intelligence applications. Now, this is a project, or not a project, this is a technology that's been around for a while, and I used to build my applications by hard coding in the AI I wanted to use, and doing that usually took me, I don't know, 30 minutes to an hour, maybe more, depending on what I'm trying to do. And this can really shorten that amount of time, really bring down the workload of what you're trying to do because you're no longer needing to hard code it. You can actually just create an API that will route to the backend uh, that you're using, and then you only interact with that backend using this software's front end, which looks like this. That allows you to make changes, do whatever you need to do. You can even change the model, or even change the provider of the model from Llama, Anthropic, OpenAI. You really have a lot of options when it comes to how you can interact with the available technologies in this space using this, instead of having to hard code, or you even use LangChain in your application, which would also work, but would bloat your code. Like, it would make it take a lot more lines versus using something like this and then just routing it in through an API. So let's go ahead and get this set up and get a basic understanding of how this software works. And after that, we can talk about how we can integrate it into a Next app and then use it to build something, or make some type of application. All right, so let's take a look at how we can actually get this program working on our machine. And to do that, we're going to need to look at the documents. We're going to go to Get Started, and we're going to need to have Node.js installed on our computer. So if you don't have that installed already, go ahead and do so. It's not very hard, and there's docs here for you also to do that. So next, you're going to open up a terminal and then find a folder that you want to install this in, and you're going to install it using the npm package. But before you do that, it seems like you need pnpm, and to install that, you need to go through these prerequisites as well. So now that you've already installed the pnpm, go ahead and get the GitHub package from this this line here, which you're going to git clone it into your folder. The reason I'm not doing these things is because I already have a folder on my computer with this installed. I don't want to install it again. Seems kind of redundant. But then you're going to go into that folder, then you're going to do pnpm install, and then you're going to build it. This all is going to take a minute or two, depending on the speed of your computer. And then you should be able to start it. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to the top here and just start it by going into the correct folder, which would be my programs. And then the ls. There's a bunch of junk in here. So now I'm going to write npx start Flowise. Oh wait, I need cd into Flowise, and then I can do that. And with everything done, you should be able to open the application and start the server that is going to be how you interface with the program that looks like this. Right, so now I'm going to go to localhost 3000, which is where Flowise is running on the server. I already have a few things here because I've been playing around with this technology for a while now, and I have been using it for writing my cover letters in a very specific use case. And the way I'm doing that, I'll just give you an example, is I have the OpenAI embeddings attached to a Pinecone server or a Pinecone database, a vector database, that has a copy of my resume in it. With that copy of my resume and GPT-4 Turbo, we are using that plus a prompt here to create cover letters that are tailored to particular jobs that I would like to apply for. This saves me a lot of time, and it makes it where I don't have to be, thinking about what the right response is to a particular employer, because I'm using my own information about myself to write these cover letters. So it is factual, and this is what you would call a RAG flow, retrieval augmented generation, where we have some form of a knowledge base, which in this case is my resume, and we're using that plus OpenAI's LLM here to create responses. I'm not going to go over this, but we're going to go back because this was just a way to understand, what it should look like once you get everything open. We're going to go back and we're going to look at the marketplace, because in the marketplace you can find a lot of different kinds of tools for doing a lot of different things, all kinds of stuff in here. It's basically like the GPT store, but honestly better, because one, it's free, and two, you can use any models you want. You could use the Anthropic AI over here. Here's one that's using a Hugging Face model. We have a lot of different things. We have Superbase database here, and a Redis vector store. All kinds of stuff is happening inside of these different starter application code strings here. But what we want to do is just a simple AI that will allow us to just talk. So we want to just give a simple tutorial. So we're going to make just basically the ChatGPT like the way you would use it normally through the website, so we can have something to call to our Next.js app when we get to the point where we're actually ready to receive a response on the front end, right? So we're just going to use this simple chain conversation, which works just like ChatGPT normally, and we're going to input we're going to say that we want to use this template. Go ahead and add my API key that I added earlier, and we have some memory storage on our computer's memory. And now that we've done all that, let me save just as test, and then now we should have the ability to talk with this artificial intelligence in this application, just like we would talk with OpenAI on their website. So I'm going to write hello. It should just respond with how can I assist you. Let's ask it an actual question to make sure that it actually is working correctly before we move forward. Let's just say, how many moons does Saturn have? 82 moons. I mean, roughly, it's probably more or less. It's always changing. I picked a very poor question. That's a very fluid answer, but it does work. We are getting responses. We're connecting to the API. We're using GPT 3.5 Turbo, and we can talk with it. Now that we have this, we can move on to figuring out a way to implement this as a backend for application. And we have a couple different options we can take, right? So there is actually a NPM module called Flowise Embed React in NPM, and then you can actually just rip this into your application. You don't even need the const app function return. You just need the JSX here to be able to pull it into your application with the correct chat flow ID, which matches up with the flow of this, because each one of your different flows here are going to have a different ID, and each ID can be used interchangeably, right? You could have multiple flows for different applications, doesn't really change anything. And we're going to do this in two different ways. We can embed it into our application using the NPM module, or we can use just plain JavaScript and basically do the same thing, but instead of pulling in the response into a pre-designed like interface, we can just get the response and build whatever interface we want. So let's begin that process, right? We need to start a new Next.js project. So we need to go to Next.js, create Next app, and we need to keep this running because the applications need to run simultaneously to make sure that whenever a call is made, we're going to be able to pull that call into the front end and have it to do whatever we're trying to do with it. So I'm going to open up a new terminal. And we're going to go into my programs folder. And now we're in the programs folder. We're going to paste in the next create app. And we're going to go through the flow of creating another Next.js application like we've done many, many times. Or at least I've done many, many times. And then we need to give the application a name. We're just going to call this Flowise. No capitals, no spaces. We're going to say Flowise Backend LLM just to keep it nice and concise. And we're using TypeScript, ESLint, Tailwind. The source directory, we do want to use the app router, even though we're probably not going to need it. And we don't care about aliases right now. After we get all of that sorted, we can go ahead and just wait for this to finish up. We also need to go to NPM and find the Flowise embed, because I'm gonna go over how to use both of them. I don't want to do one or the other. I think understanding how to use both of these would help different people in different situations. Maybe you just want to add some like chatbot that has information about your website and some FAQ questions, and that would be good for something like this. But let's say maybe you want to, change that data and morph it into something else after you got the response into your application. I feel like the other flow where you're using the JavaScript API calling, the fetch calling here would be a better flow for something like that. So we'll just go over both. All right. So now we should have our application done. I'm going to type code dot, and we're going to wait for this to open. Oh, I didn't go into the folder. That's my mistake. We need to cd Flowise, what do we call this? Backend LLM, then code dot. Okay, now we're in our application, and now we need to open a terminal in here. We can actually get rid of this because we no longer need it. And now we can make sure we still have this running, so don't close that out, and then we can start up our next app. So npm next dev, or am I typing this wrong? pnpm All right, now we have our next app running. So we basically have two applications running on this machine at the same time, which is fine. And we're going to go to our source folder, and we're going to go to our page. And just like we've done in a lot of these tutorials that I've been making, we're going to erase everything. We don't really care about what's already here. We want to do our own thing. So we're going to get rid of all this. Save the page, and now it's all gone. We're going to write hello world just to make sure everything is working, and everything's working. Right, so now we need to get this npm package, which is called Flowise Embed React. And we're going to very quickly just use this so you can get an understanding of what it looks like when you get the application working this way. So we're going to have to split our terminal. And now we can copy and paste that npm package and install it into this application folder. Right, and then now we're going to go ahead and pull this in, even though it's not done yet, which is fine because we know it'll work out. And then we're going to get the bubble chat. It's a capital B, bubble chat. So now we have two ways of pulling in our embed. We have the bubble chat and a full page chat. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to our next app and bring it over to the side, just to make it a little easier to see what's going on while we're coding. And then we're going to come over here and go to our embed, and we literally have the pop-up and the full page. So what we're going to do is I'm just going to grab the full page, pop it into our application like this, and then we're going to go to our next app, and we need to set our page to be a client component because we want this to happen on the client. And all components start out as server components unless you specify so in Next.js. It's reloading, and now we have that application here. We have this flow here where we were asking about the moon in our next app. And the reason it looks weird is because the styling for the page is conflicting with what we're doing. Like, I feel like if I take this div out, it'll clean up a little more. There we go. Now it's in the middle at least, blah, blah, blah. And let's ask it about the moons, okay? And we get the response that we got before, 82 or something. And that's how you would just, embed it into your application after creating your flow in your other app so that you can use it in your Next.js, right? We don't also have to use that particular one. That was the pop-up. No, that was the full page. And now we can use the pop-up just to see what it looks like and give you an idea of what that would be. We're going to go ahead and delete this, and well, actually no, let's keep them both. It doesn't matter. Now we go ahead and save, and now we have a little bubble here with basically what we just saw on the other full page chat little interface, but now it's tied to this bubble, which will lock itself down into the corner here, which can be useful for like an FAQ or something along the lines of, just something you want to do for like a business. I feel like that's the main like use case. Like you're selling something or you're running a store and you need to get some questions about like warranty or other things easily answered, which is done very well by something that looks like this. But now that we've kind of gone over the aspect of doing it in this way, I'm going to go ahead and delete all this, because now we're going to look at how we could take just the response using JavaScript. All right, I had recorded this, but I guess I lost the footage. So I'm going to go over how to set this up again, and I'm going to try and explain everything that happened so you can understand each part of what's going on. I'm going to delete this line because we don't need it. That was for the embeds that we are not using. This line can go too. All right, so we need to set up some use state so we can manage our input and the message we receive as a response. That's what these two lines of code are doing. We're setting up an input value and a message. And these are how you get data into those two variables. Next, we have our code that we literally just ripped from here. It's this function, just right here. So you don't need to understand anything about this. It's just calling our API, and it's getting a response and then returning it as result. So next, we are going to create two functions, one to handle our input so we can ask a question to the API and then put that into our query. And then we have a way to send that back to our backend here with the input value as the question, which will get used here. And then once we get a response, we are going to console log it so we can review whatever came back just in case. And then we're going to set the message state that we created up here so that the message variable will contain the response that we got from our backend. And now I'm going to write the front end for this because I lost the code for that. And it's not very complicated. We're just going to create an input that's going to be text, and we're going to give it a value of the input. So the value input, or input value, I'm sorry. And then on change, we're going to handle the input. And then we could use some placeholder text to help the user understand, like ask a question. And that's all we need for the input, so that we can ask a question and send it over to our LLM on the back end. Next, we're going to need a button. We're going to need to have something happen when that button is pressed. And then we're going to use the handle click function that we created to run the LLM. So I'm just going to write run LLM. Keeping it simple. Next, we're going to need somewhere for what we are doing to show up on our screen. So I'm just going to create a div and then insert a P into it, a paragraph tag. And that paragraph tag will have the JavaScript of our message, right? And the message is being written here as the text of the response we get from our LLM here, just like if we were writing in here, where we were talking about the moons. So now, if we go ahead and save this and go over to our app, as you can see, I've already run the application because my footage was deleted. I'm going to reload the page, re-enter that same question, and run it. And we get a response based on information about the moon. Another thing that makes this really cool is the fact that you are not hamstrung into just using the OpenAI's AI API. You know, you can change this to use other models. So let's go ahead and look at some of the chat models we have to pick from. And there's quite a few. You can use a Hugging Face model. You could use any of these things. And the only thing you would need to change is literally like 1 or 2 lines of code. Well, actually not lines of code. You would just need to come in here and get rid of that, change this to use that chat model, and then add your API key from Anthropic if you're going to use that particular model. And then now you save it. And we literally could still use the code we have on the front end the same way we did with OpenAI, but now we're using the Anthropic API, which is giving us a very similar response, but it does seem to be a little more thorough in the information it's giving us, right? So this is why I think Flowise is so powerful, because you can kind of tailor your response or your model to do whatever you're needing to do here without necessarily needing to change your code that you're using to display and interact with that information on your front end application, which in my case is Next.js, which I think is really, really powerful because you have all of these different things you can do. You can chain responses together. You can take information and put it in a vector store and then use that vector store as a knowledge base to do other things besides just, ask questions about random stuff. You could make it very, very specific, and that's very powerful. That's pretty much the end of this small tutorial about how to set up a simple chatbot using Flowise. And if you learned anything, I hope that is enough to earn a subscribe from you. I appreciate you making it to the end of the video. Thank you for watching, and have a good one.